Welcome to the Toronto Sports Rush right here on the Bet Rivers Network. Remember to like and subscribe. We always have good content for you. And this is Hradek. I'm joined today by my friend Steve Simmons up north of the border there, the longtime columnist for the Toronto Sun. And Steve has done a couple of spots with us, and he was good enough to take a few minutes today. I was really eager to speak with you again after reading some things in your column that kind of really resonated with me, because I felt the same way when, I guess it wasn't too long ago, maybe a week ago now, Darren Ferris, the agent for Mitch Marner, was interviewed in a pretty long-ranging interview, and he decided to go into a lot of these things that went on with Marner with Toronto and kind of relitigate them, a year later. And, after he's left Toronto, and I just didn't really understand what purpose that served. You wrote about it in your column, in the Sun. Just give me your thoughts on Ferris and the decision to kind of talk about that now publicly. It just didn't really make any sense to me.
Well, the first thing I thought about afterwards is there's no way in hell I'd ever hire Darren Ferris to be my agent. I wouldn't want him representing me. I wouldn't want him speaking for me. I wouldn't want any of that at all. It's an incredible story, the Marner thing, because it's dead here, basically. It's over. It's done. Yeah. He played here. He had a great 9 years. He didn't have a very good playoff 9 years. He was in the playoffs 9 years in a row. He was among the top 5 paid players in the NHL. He was among the top 10 scorers in the NHL. I mean, it was a pretty darn good run. And they can't let this thing go. At the end of the end of the season, it's boo-hoo, Mitch. I was treated badly in Toronto. I was mistreated in Toronto. I'm going to talk about it, which of course he hasn't really talked about because there's really no story. I would love to be treated the way he was mistreated. I would love to have that salary coming in and 9 years of incredible success and for the first 100-point winger in team history and 2 first All-Stars teams, which have to go back to Frank Mahovlich to equal. Just an incredible run. And these guys are boo-hooing all over the place. And then the idiot agent Ferris goes on radio or on a podcast, and they mistreated Mitch. They didn't protect him. Yeah. Protect him how? Yeah. Ryan Reeves was here. He protected him. Wayne Simmons was here. He protected him. Yeah. Exactly. How did they not protect him? He played on the first line. He played more minutes, by the way, than any player up front in the NHL other than McDavid and Draisaitl in his time in Toronto. Yeah. Boy, they sure didn't protect that guy. Yeah. Put him in every situation to try and succeed on the first power play, on the first line with the best center. It's baffling to me. It's mind-boggling. What they should do is we had 9 wonderful years. It didn't work out in the end. I didn't want to stay. I made my choice, and it worked out. He had a great playoff. He had a fantastic playoffs with Vegas. But my God, can we put this other stuff to rest? And one of the things that came up was Austin Matthews got a rookie signing bonus. Yeah. This is 4 general managers ago. Yeah. He got a rookie signing bonus from Lou Lamoriello, who never gave out rookie signing bonuses because he got the first pick in the draft and he knew he had to do it. And that was the way things were at that moment in time. Marner picked the year before, didn't get the rookie signing bonus. Yeah. And it's like, it's 10 years later. First of all, you've jumped him in some of the salary stuff along the way. Yeah. And, you got your money back. It's not, it's just mind-boggling to me that an agent who once had a reasonable reputation would put himself out there to look so absolutely foolish. Yeah, I felt the same way, Steve. I just didn't get what good it does at this point. I mean, like, Mitch has left. He went to Vegas, his preferred destination in the end. The Leafs helped accommodate that with a
a trade so he could get the extra year on his contract. And, he had a very good year in Vegas. He had an unbelievable run, as you mentioned, in the playoffs. I mean, really, if Vegas would have found a way to win a couple more games and win the Stanley Cup, he likely would have been the Conn Smythe Trophy winner. I mean, I just don't know why you would want to relitigate things that happened years ago, especially something as simple as that signing bonus, because it's not like Mitch has been out on the street panhandling here. I mean, this guy has made a lot of money. And to think about what a small portion or percentage of that was, if to view that as such a slight that you would be talking about it years later after you've made all this money and had all this success, I just don't understand it. And I will at least say this is Ferris speaking. It was not Marner speaking.
No.
And I don't know, what their interactions are like. I don't really know Darren Ferris, to be quite honest. And I've had limited interactions with Marner over the years. I got to see him a lot more during the Cup final because we're out there covering it. But, again, I just shake my head because, you're an agent, you're representing someone, you're trying to put them in the best light all the time. To go back and talk about that now, even when, you go on a podcast, you're going to be asked about it. I mean, why not just say, listen, it's behind us. Mitch loves Toronto. He loved the Leafs. He had a great, wish he could have won a Stanley Cup there, but he's moved on. Why not just say that and move on yourself?
There's something odd about what I'll call the Marner group.
Yeah.
His family and him and Ferris. And it's a very strange mix of people who do everything in the world to supposedly protect Mitch and supposedly think in Mitch's best interest. But very often what they're doing is they're making him look bad.
Yeah.
I mean, his dad did that for years here with, his conversations with certain reporters and his conversations with other people. And he always thought Mitch was getting screwed by somebody over something. Mm-hmm. There's a story where he invited a bunch of people to come to a Leaf game, and they meet post game in a certain area, and everybody's there, and some of them are wearing Leaf jerseys with Marner on the back, and some of them are wearing Leaf jerseys with Matthews on the back. And apparently Paul Marner went nuts at the people who, it's not about the team. It's not about the name on the front, remember. It's about the name on the back, which is the opposite. But they've been telling this kid all of this for his entire life. I mean, he's an incredibly gifted hockey player. And the family's been telling, you're better than this, and they're screwing you, and they're doing this to you, and people are writing bad things about you, and online they're saying bad things about you. And every time someone writes something or says something, they all run to him and tell him, this is what they did and said about you. It's like high school. Yeah. And one of my kids described this whole Leaf Marner relationship to me as, did you ever have a bad breakup in high school where you were in love with this girl or this guy, and that was going to be your person for life, and then of course it doesn't work out, and you're brokenhearted. And then 10 minutes later in high school, you're on to the next, whatever the next thing is.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's 10 years later, and he still hasn't gotten over the signing bonus thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, listen, I guess if, Darren Ferris wanted to, ease his conscience or get that off his chest, he was able to do it. And, I don't really know what purpose it really served other than to kind of talk about something. As you mentioned, you're in Toronto, and I think more is made of listen, it's unfortunate. You lose a terrific player, he leaves, and you don't get nearly the equal compensation in return. It didn't work out. You don't win a Stanley Cup. I mean, it could have been a great story. He's from there, all that stuff. But it is kind of in the past. I know in talking to Leafs fans, they've kind of moved on. Marner's moved on. Like I said, didn't make much sense to bring it up, but you were of the like mind to me.
There was a phenomenal 9-year run of teams that were talented enough to compete for the Stanley Cup. Yeah. I'm not going to say they could win the Stanley Cup, but to compete. And they just didn't do it. And, Brendan Shanahan got fired because after 9 years they didn't make the playoffs again. In the 10th year they didn't make the playoffs for the first time. So it's like very few general managers put together, or presidents or whatever, put together streaks or strings of 100-point teams 9 years in a row.
Yeah.
And the Leafs did that, and they had a good run, but it just didn't happen in April and May.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you about Shanahan. You bring him up. The Red Wings job is open. The general manager's job is open there. We don't know which direction they're going to go. I'm of the mind that, Shanahan would be an interesting candidate for a lot of teams right now, just because, in Toronto, when he was hired, he had no experience. And as you point out, he helped kind of rebuild that franchise in a lot of different ways, but it was a very good team and a playoff team. They didn't win the cup, but they were a good team. It doesn't seem like his name is coming up. I think Brendan Shanahan's name should be more prominent in some of these discussions. Do you agree or not?
Oh, I absolutely agree. If you look at, I think it's like 5 or 6 teams have changed general managers in the past 6 months. And I think you got to consider him for any of those positions. If, and here's the big if he wants to do the GM work. Because being a president of a hockey team and being a general manager are not the same job.
Correct.
And so if he wants to, and I believe he does from having spoken to him, I believe he has interest in other positions with other teams. Now it's a question of how they're going to consider him, or will they consider him? And to me, Detroit is perfect, other than one problem. Detroit he won 3 Stanley Cups with the Red Wings. He had a great run there. He goes into a place where the team is close to being okay. With, of course, the Larkin thing you deal with, but it's not a bad place for a guy to come in and clean up Yzerman's mess, so to speak. But here's the problem: Yzerman and Shanahan are close friends, and they played together, and they done a lot of things together over the years, and they have a pretty darn close relationship. So it's, do you want, or can you get along with your friend when you're taking his job? And I don't know if Brendan wants to do that, unless it just becomes so apparent to him that they want him. I'm not sure what the Red Wings are doing, frankly. They fired Yzerman 3 months after missing the playoffs. Like, did it take them that long to figure out they didn't want him there anymore?
Yeah, it's a strange story, and it's stranger in that, I was always of the mind that Yzerman was very, very close with the Ilitch family. Certainly, Mike Ilitch, who has passed away over the last several years now, and his wife Marion, they're the kind of patriarchs of the ownership of that family. And Yzerman was very close with them. I don't think he's quite as close with Chris Ilitch, who is the son and who is really running things now. And so in the end, he made the decision to move on from Yzerman. So maybe it was one of those things that they needed the time to figure out what they were going to do, just because it was a kind of complicated relationship there with family members and ownership and Yzerman. But in the end, they decided to go in another direction. I just think since Shanahan has been out, we haven't heard his name. We've heard his name linked to things, but in the end, when you do the reporting, he's not really a candidate. Like we thought about New Jersey, he was really not a candidate there. The Nashville opportunity, he really wasn't a candidate there. I find it surprising because, yeah, he didn't win in Toronto, but in the end, he did build a pretty darn good team there.
Well, it's funny because I just heard Jimmy Rutherford's name mentioned as a possible Red Wings person. And I'm thinking, I love Jimmy, but at this stage of his life and this stage of his career, I'm not sure I'd want him running my team anymore.
I'm pretty sure I wouldn't either.
And Brendan's still a young, vibrant, smart guy. Again, the GM job is detailed. It's hockey detail. And you got to be willing to do everything from be in the rink to be looking at who might be your first pick, in Western Canada or somewhere, or to all the other things that go involved with, your scouting staff and your coaching staff and all the daily things that go into running a hockey club. So I don't know. I'm not convinced that he's committed to doing all that stuff. And it's funny. Somebody told me years ago And I've always thought that you don't fire someone without knowing who you think you're going to hire. I think that's always the best way. I always think of when the coach is when the new coach is in the hotel the night before you fire your coach, you know who you're hiring. Tortorella's coming in to take over for Cassidy. But I'm just saying you should be the same with your GM job especially a team like the Red Wings who've been around forever. But what happens, and EJ, you've seen this, I'm sure, before, when a patriarch passes on in a sporting sense or any business sense, really, and the kids move in or the daughter moves in or whoever it happens to be, it's never the same.
Yeah,
it's never quite the same. It's not the same trust. It's not the same feel. And I think the Red Wings now, as ownership, have to rebuild that trust and rebuild the Ilitch name, which was such a significant name in the sport of hockey.
No question. Certainly one of the most successful ownership groups for many, many years. Obviously, it's been hard times over the last 8-9 years as they've tried to figure things out. But the search goes on. I'm hearing Ryan Martin's name is a young guy that worked with Kenny Holland there in Detroit, is now with the Rangers. So we'll see if that happens. I haven't talked to you since the Leafs hired Jim Hiller. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on, we've had a little time. Hiller's spoken to the media there. What did you make of that hire?
He's a nice man. There's no question about it. We're going to enjoy day to day working with Jim Hiller. What I don't have any sense of, and I've talked to people and I've asked people, I have no sense of how good a coach he is. What's he? He's been around a long time, and there's been a lot of opportunities for people to hire Jim Hiller, and along the way, nobody did, or the Kings did in a interim kind of way. So we don't know. I don't think anybody knows what kind of head coach he's going to be. And, the one thing that we've seen up close in Toronto, and you see it in other places when it happens, when a Pat Burns comes in, when a Pat Quinn comes in, everything changes. Everything changes not just because of the players you have, but because of the coach you have. When you have, I'll use last season, when you have Craig Berube, unfortunately, that doesn't happen. He's not Pat Quinn. He's not Pat Burns. Those guys are in the Hall of Fame for a reason. So what I don't know is Jim Hiller the next Mike Murphy, the next, whoever, Ron Wilson, guys who are just so here, or is he going to be a guy who leaves a mark? What we do know right now is that the Leafs hired a GM in John Chaika that nobody else in the NHL had much interest in hiring. And now they've hired a head coach who really has not been much interest of anyone hiring over the years either. So either they're way smarter than we are, or, we'll find out, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought the Hiller thing was interesting to me only because, one of the things that I thought about Jim was that, like, in that playoff series against the Oilers, it didn't go well, and there were some tactical errors that helped the Oilers overcome a deficit in that series and win. But it was just that kind of meltdown after a game with the media with, I thought, pretty fair questions. And, I don't want to keep going back to that. I've talked about it a couple of occasions, but, you're in Toronto now. I mean, it's relentless. As you well know, you'll be right there asking the questions. So, maybe that was just a blip, but, that would concern me, especially in a place like Toronto. Can he handle the day-to-day pressure when things don't go well and people ask tough questions?
Well, that's actually where Berube and before him, Sheldon Keefe handled it really nicely and handled it very well. From first of all, you got to be in the playoffs to get into the kind of situation that Hiller was in LA. What concerns me more than how is he going to handle the questions is he comes out of a trapping environment, a 1-3-1 when he had his most success. That's not going to play here. And it's people aren't going to want that. And so he's going to have to play a different style. So it reminds me, what made Don Shula such a great coach. When he had Dan Marino, he had a great passing game. When he had Larry Zonka and Jim Kick, he had a great running game. And whatever, he changed his team to the talent he had to play the way, he needed to play. What do we know about Jim Hiller as a head coach? We don't know. And so, again, I'll go back to when Pat Burns came in, we knew what Pat Burns hockey was. Didn't take long to figure that out. Didn't take long to figure out Pat Quinn was in charge. All you had to do was spend 2 minutes around there. Like one handshake, and when your hand disappears in his, it's like, thank you very much. Can I have my hand back now?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Hey, I want to ask you about another thing, about another coach, Mike Babcock, because you've been around Mike Babcock, covered him for a long time. That was a big story that he ends up back in the NHL with the Edmonton Oilers. And what did you think about that decision? I'm sure you watched or at least saw the highlights or the clips of the press conference. What do you make of Mike Babcock in Edmonton? Do you think he can have success there?
I seem to be in the minority on this. I like the hire.
Okay.
I think the Edmonton Oilers need structure. And you watch that team in the last few years, they didn't look like a team to me. They had a couple of great players, a few great players, and then they have all these other guys.
Well, they did go to the finals twice, Steve.
I know that. And what happened in the finals? They
lost.
They could have won. They could have won the first one. That was winnable, although they got down and came back. But my point is that I thought that as time went on, the last few years after going to the finals the first time, the team got worse and worse to me. And you watched them last season, and they didn't look like a hockey team to me. They looked like great players and a bunch of other guys. And I think the one thing Mike Babcock will do, everyone will have a job. Everyone will know what their job is. He will be so clear with everybody about that. He's a very good hockey coach. He's not a good person, but the very fact he's not a good person doesn't mean you have to be however you're going to be as a coach. Like I'll use my favorite Steve Shutt quote. He said, "We liked Scotty Bowman one day a year, the day we got our rings. The rest of the time they didn't. And you don't have to like, although it's different. Players today are a little more tender, if you want to call it that. And so Babs is going to have to tone that down. And I hope his assistants can do some of that for him. But I'll tell you my favorite Mike Babcock story. It's after that World Cup of hockey. And Joel Quenneville and Claude Julien were on his staff. And they're walking out of the Air Canada Center at the time. And one turns to the other and says, you need a vacation? And he said, yeah, from hockey. And the other guy says, no, from him.
From Babcock.
Yeah. Because he's so intense all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, here are two intense coaches that found his intensity a little much.
Yeah. I would say this, though, about, you talk about things haven't gone well in Edmonton. I put that, for me, Steve, I put that more on management. I think they've really made some moves there that made no sense. They let Holloway and Broberg leave via an offer sheet. I just think you can never do that with good players. They brought in players and they've paid them a lot of money that, to me, again, don't make a ton of sense. So, yeah, Chris Knoblauch, maybe it was time for Chris to go. And, listen, he's sitting there getting paid, I think, for the next 4 years. So good for him. And I think Chris is a pretty good young coach, and he'll have a chance, hopefully, to coach again. And I don't dispute what you said about Mike. I think Mike is a really good coach. But I don't remember Mike winning in Detroit or anywhere when he had suspect goaltending and shoddy defense. And so they can get all the structure they want, but they're going to have to figure those things out personnel-wise. And then at the end of the day, Connor McDavid, who is a great player, obviously, but Connor McDavid doesn't play like Sidney Crosby, or for that matter, like Macklin Celebrini. He doesn't dominate in the 200-foot game as a center iceman. Will Mike Babcock be demanding more of Connor McDavid in the D zone? So these are all things to be determined. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think he will, and whether they accept it or not is another question. But if you choose to play Draisaitl and McDavid apart, nobody has two centers like that. You're putting out something that no other team can match. And so if you can figure out, how different is that than having Datsik and whoever and Zetterberg when he used to split those guys up, you know, that's that.
Well, he had Lindstrom.
Yep.
And then for some years he had Hasek, and other
Yes.
years he had like Chris Osgood, who has 400 career wins. I mean, he doesn't have those guys.
I don't like what Stan Bowman has done in many ways. but I think
I'll add one more many.
Okay, I think the bringing in of Freddie Anderson, who knows Babcock, who played for him in Toronto,
True.
I think is a really sound move. And I think Freddie Anderson's the best goalie that Edmonton's had since Mike Smith.
You could be right about that, but he is a little longer in the tooth, and he does have a history of having injury, and these are questions.
So what you have to do during the season is you have to establish who your number two is.
Yeah,
and whether that's whoever's there right now, or someone they pick up, or Devin Levi, or but you have to have that. In today's game, goalies can't play 60, 70 games anymore playing butterfly style. They just can't. Bodies can't take it. And so
hopefully Tristan Jarry, who was another kind of one of those shake your head kind of deals, who's now there, is already signed, and he's on a deal that he did in Pittsburgh. Hopefully he's going to be able to establish himself as the number two, or Devin Levi. But I think they're going to end up rotating those three guys. And I think they're all going to be part of things there. I still wonder about their defense as well. So there's a lot of questions. I think that's one of those great stories, Steve, that we're going to be watching right from opening day of camp.
Well, I made a Dan Marino analogy earlier.
Yeah.
This is the same. Did Dan Marino ever win the Super Bowl? No. Was it his fault? Not necessarily. In McDavid's case, will he win a Stanley Cup? Will Draisaitl win a Stanley Cup? It's the story that you start every year asking.
Yeah, and let's face it. I mean, there's 32 teams now. It's harder these days to do that than it maybe was in a 16 league or 20, even a 21 team league. So the world is different, harder for these guys. We'll see. We will be watching. I know you'll be watching, and I know that you're off on your way today, so I'm going to let you go.
Thank you.
But thanks so much for the time. I always appreciate chit-chatting with you, and I thought your comments on the Darren Ferris stuff was so bang on. I had to get you on and ask you about it. So thanks for the time, Steve. Enjoy your day.
Let's do it again.
All right, anytime. Steve Simmons, columnist, longtime columnist for the Toronto Sun, does a great job for many, many years. Always love catching up with him. You have been watching the Toronto Sports Rush right here on the Bet Rivers Network. Like and subscribe. We will talk to you soon.